Hi, Dan.
Hey, Shiran. Happy Sunday afternoon. And thank you for joining me on this fireside chat, or as we can maybe call it, a quarantine side chat.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So first I want to give a quick introduction about you to the listening audience. So I've known Shiran for a couple years now, and she was living in Tel Aviv in Israel when I met her, and she's made the trek to California, now living in San Francisco, doing the startup life and doing really well with her her company Cassiopeia. So really excited to hear a little bit more about Cassiopeia and what you're up to, and a little bit about why you started this company. Kind of what's the passion, what's the fire inside of you that prompted you to start Cassiopeia. So with that, I'll hand the mic to you for a moment.
Thank you, Dan. I'm really excited to be here today, and thank you for this interview. So, as you mentioned, originally from Israel, and I moved to the Bay Area 5 months ago, actually, to be closer to our customer base. And Cassiopeia empowers leaders to improve collaboration, belonging, and mental health by using communication pattern analysis. Our latest solution actually empowers remote managers with the insights they now need the most these days to improve collaboration, belonging, and mental health within teams, remote teams. And the story behind Cassiopeia it's actually started a few years ago. My co-founders and I both managed and worked in decentralized teams. I managed remote teams for many years. And we know how hard it is to foster inclusion, equality, and collaboration, and even more so when workplace is virtual. So in many points in my life, I saw how hard it is. And in the last few years, we have been working with managers, helping them to improve their team culture, and we want to keep using our technology and product expertise to just improving human behavior and support leaders more. So this is our
That's
story.
awesome. Well, yeah, you're doing well. I remember the first time you pitched what you're doing to me, I was extraordinarily impressed, and it's a noble organization and a noble mission. So yeah, super excited and honored to be interviewing you today. So kind of with that, what you said, we have to jump into the kind of the big pandemic that's going on with COVID-19. So it feels like to me in the past 4 months, how we work, how we interact, how we connect has completely been turned upside down, right? Some out there say the future of work has come very quickly up behind us, and the now of work used to be is what the future of work we were all preparing for 1 or 2 years. So as far as organizations with connectivity and how they work together, I mean, what are you seeing with clients? What's different? And what are organizations doing to stay connected? And really a world that's been turned upside down for how they previously had worked together.
Yeah, it's really a great question, and it's definitely interesting times we're living in. So it's definitely interesting. We see the interesting trends. So a few weeks ago, actually, a few of our customers reached out to us and asked for help in empowering remote managers. Remote work and reduced social connectedness creates new challenges for managers these days. And well, I must say that most managers are not proficient in managing remote teams, which in many cases requires different sets of competencies and embracing new tools. And from what I hear from our customers is that the first few weeks since the COVID-19 outbreak, so the first few weeks were dedicated more to supporting employees through the shift to remote work and find solutions for critical business and human problems. But now, as more companies announce they will return to work from the office only in September, like Slack just announced last week, I get a sense that in the last 1 to 2 weeks or so, many leaders start to focus more on how to create a better work experience while working remotely, what they can do in order to really think about it more strategically, how they can improve the experience for their employees while still working remotely.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've noticed is, I mean, there's been a lot of positive effects that have happened, right, because of this. I think the level of conversation that typically happens. I kind of joke the old, "How are you doing today?" Used to be sort of a throwaway question, in in real life. People would just say, "I'm doing fine," then you move on. But now it's really asked with a true caring, right? How are you doing today? And it's opened up conversation that I think remote workers now in a remote sense are learning more about each other. I think people are inviting each other into their homes, with virtual cameras now. So and data has shown, and what we've been hearing, and is that engagement is actually increasing because of this. We're not taking employees for granted. Not that any organization should ever do that, but now it's just amplified, right? Town halls that used to happen every 3 months are happening every 1 month, right? One-on-ones that would be every 1 month are happening every week. So I think this is really helping, build a better sense of community. And so curious, number one, do you agree with this? Are you seeing this with clients who you work with? And number two, how can we sustain this, right? Once we start to move back to our normal state, this feeling of being connected, being heard, feeling safe. How do we take what we've learned, the positives of this, and I'm an optimist, and then keep that going from a future perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we talked about it, Dan, that you're a great optimist, and definitely I agree. There's a lot of positive side to what we are just seeing. And I definitely agree with what you just mentioned. We see from our data that employees report more empathic communication with their colleagues and managers these days, which is amazing. As you mentioned, also I feel it when I'm having just Zoom calls, people just open up and share a bit more about their challenges, and I think it's quite amazing. More companies talking these days about the accelerated process the COVID-19 outbreak created also for the transformation of leaders. As you mentioned, we feel it's at the beginning of the interview, you mentioned it, that the COVID-19 outbreak actually accelerated few processes and that we already experienced. And I recently interviewed Amy Capolanti-Wolf, the former SVP and CHRO for Symantec. And we both agree that we see more leaders that are empathetic, agile, humble, and bold in making decisions, which is really important. And I think that companies that don't have this kind of leaders these days, that are very sensitive, connected, and innovative, won't be able to come out from this crisis in a good shape. So yeah. No, that's it's interesting. I mean, this social experiment, I think, is really I think forcing organizations in a real positive way to remember it is all about your people, right? Putting people first and making sure they have a voice, making sure they feel safe, which is again what you do so well in your organization. But with that, while I'm an optimist, I do have to ask you, do you think there are long-term effects let's say we don't know how long this is going to last for, but if it were to last for six more months for some workers, is there a loneliness factor or being isolated for too long that will have effects that we're not seeing right now, all right? Because right now there's a sense where we're feeling more connected, where I'm hearing from my manager more often, I'm hearing from my CEO all the time, this is great, but are there things happening under the surface that we just don't know about yet? And you're an expert in this, and just curious to get your perspective on that. Yeah, so definitely. Research shows that 66% of remote employees experience difficulties with loneliness, work-life balance, collaboration, and staying motivated. So I hear a lot that also there's a lot of employees that feel that, you know, work remotely actually make them be more productive, which is great, but also we need to consider also the long-term outcomes, and as you mentioned, there's significant factors we need to consider, and managers can't see their employees in the hallways anymore and get a sense of their work experience. It's not like that anymore, that you just can pick on the other room and see how it's like, how people collaborate. Also using surveys, it's can be a challenge, as many people work more intensively these days. You need to grab their attention. Also, you need to make sure that people feel comfortable enough to share their needs, while some people might be afraid for losing their job. So there's a lot of challenges also to stay connected to your team, and to get a sense of the collaboration, and if there's any problems, you know, while working remotely. And I believe that remote work also creates amazing opportunities in both technological and human perspective. As all of our communication just shifted to online, people analytics has much more power to provide amazing value for leaders today. And I'm sure you will agree. And helping them to bridge that gap and using the proper tools for connecting better with their teams. This is what we do today, detecting collaboration problems in real time and get the insights they need to improve collaboration and belonging. I think this is a real power. And I think we are all responsible for this, not just HR, but leaders. Leaders need to take the right actions and use the proper tools to make it work.
Yeah, it's well said. So a question is, if I'm an employee listening to this, and you know, you and I would both agree, and everyone should agree, you know, the importance of inclusion, and every voice matters, and you know, every idea should be heard. I mean, this is how great movements happen. This is how change happens. This is what, you know, beautiful culture is made up of. But if in this new virtual world, as an employee, if you're feeling like you're not, maybe you're shy, right? Maybe you don't speak up as much. Who knows? It could be a handful of things, but you're not feeling that inclusive environment in a remote workforce now that's working in this way. What would you recommend? I mean, is that a conversation with a manager, with HR? Because these are unprecedented times, and these types of conversations around how can I be effective, right? How can I make sure my voice is being heard? You know, what would be your statement around that?
So I think there's many actions leaders can take. I think definitely using the proper technological tools is one of them. Also, staying very empathetic, as we mentioned, more connected to your team, but also try to get the pulse of the team while working remotely. What we do, we use analyzing communication patterns just to get this pulse, get more visibility into the team's collaboration and belonging. And I feel just using these kind of solutions really helps leaders to lead better people these days, and more for the long term as well. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, you know, we've been talking about a lot of, you know, words like empathy and agility and being resilient, and I think these are words that have more meaning than they've ever had. I joke around the word, you know, we need a culture that's agile, right? I think we've heard the word agile, and you and I are tech geeks, and so we know where agile came from, and we know what it means and the importance of it. But I would argue that the meaning of it now has never been, right, more amplified and more powerful. And so when we think about words, and we're starting to hear this concept of the new normal, right? So and what that means for organizations, what that means for larger society. And there's no perfect road to get there. There's no playbook to get there. But as you think about that new normal, I guess my question would be for you, how would you define it? And what do you think we need to do as people in society and organizations to really start to make our way back? And with that, what things do you think will change? What things do you think will continue? What things might stop? This is a big question, but it's real important. And just curious to get your perspective on that. And then I'll have a few follow-up questions on this as well.
Sure. So I'm talking to many leaders and especially many HR professionals these days, and I hear more and more that more companies and employees would work remotely much more than they used before. And people will connect more online. In the last few weeks, both organizations and employees got used to it and see the advantage in just working remotely. So first, I believe we will connect in a virtual space much more than we used to. So this is how the new normal will look like in many cases. And as we will continue to lead people in the virtual space, I believe there will be a greater need to also connect with people more, as you mentioned. Also, people feel this need, they want to feel more connected, they want to feel more empathy, and being very agile and innovative. As I believe that the world is shifting very fast. We can feel it, just in the last few weeks, and leaders understand they need to stay very connected to their people in order to adapt quickly for addressing future challenges. I feel that being agile and innovative and using the proper means to help you to do that is very important.
Yeah, I mean, there's this thing, I've been thinking about the characteristics of leaders, and there's a lot of kind of classic lists of what we know or what we've researched that makes an effective leader or an inspiring leader. But living through this and over the past few weeks, months now, the word humility comes to mind, and I say, and I do have a question that's coming from this, and when what I mean by that there are no answers in many cases. So I think leaders need to be empowered to be able to say, I don't know, right? I don't know what the answer is, and let's figure it out together, right? So there is this idea of cohesiveness and leaders sort of leaning on each other, and leaders leaning on their teams to get through. And so I think there's a humility that's inherent and important for leaders that I think navigate through crisis. So, when you think about some of the data and research you've done, I think there's two types of leaders, and I'm curious, from your perspective, how are they different, or is it just sort of inherent? So there are leaders that manage through crisis who can really respond. Then there's those leaders who are just kind of steady at what they do, and they help build safety, team collaboration. They help guide, and they're just that steady Eddie leader. And then there's that leader, like I said, on the other hand, that knows how to jump in, manage through crisis. And do you think those skills on the other of crisis management, is that something that can be taught, or is that kind of just inherent to the person? And it kind of comes down to the person making a team feel safe, right? Like, what are the characteristics from your research and making sure teams feel safe and people feel like a sense of they're taken care of, and kind of reducing fear? What are those? If I'm a leader, what do I do to really be as effective as possible in those scenarios?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think there is no easy answer for that. But what we do see is that leaders, in order to lead through crises, they need to be very to have really good listening skills, to get a sense of their team, and to be very responsive, and to get, you know, real-time kind of actions when something goes wrong. So there is also just the day-to-day kind of communication and problem solving. For example, we saw in many companies that we are working with that everyone's talking about, you know, over communication. You need to over communicate, people need to feel connected. But what we see in the last few weeks or so is that also when you're over communicate too much and for too long, also people get really difficulties in just completing their, you know, their personal tasks, and they can really work. You know, they're not that productive. So you need to sense that, you know, in real time, and to be such a good listener to just create this right balance for your team. So I think good listening skills, and be very proactive, very engaged, very open, you know, have this open communication with your team. I think these are really important qualities that we see from our experience.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think I was actually talking to a friend of mine recently, you know, about just, so he's working with folks on his team, and he was having a conversation with someone on his team, and as we started off this call by saying there is a lot more open conversation and checking in on each other, but someone on his team gave him feedback and said, you know what, I'm fine. What helps me is getting into work and really start getting back into what I love doing, because this is an escape for me, because I have 3 kids at home, right? I have a barking dog, and when we're working, I kind of want to just get back into work. And it was really helpful for him. He's like, and his point was, and I think it was a really good one, is everyone sort of needs different things. So to your point, this idea of listening to what your people need. I mean, there isn't a blanket leadership approach for your team. Some just want to kind of forget about what's going on, right? With the pandemic and with being quarantined, and just jump into using their brain and problem solving at work. And some really might need to talk more and just share things. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great to hear your confirmation of that. Because now I've heard that from you, and I've heard that from him in the past couple of days. It's actually been a great learning for me, right? You kind of think everyone wants to check in with each other, but some people just want to not think about it and get back to work, because that gives them that feeling of you know, accomplishment, and that gives them that feeling of safety, because that's what they love doing. They just want to keep doing it.
Exactly.
So you know, so before we wrap up, so what's next for Cassiopeia? I mean, I've seen your progression. You guys have really been growing well as an organization, and I know we all in this industry, this is a tough time for everyone right now. And I think the most important thing we're all doing is we're being helpful, right? We're reaching out to the community. We're building bonds that we haven't had before, and I've been so proud to be working in this space, across the talent space. And I think folks who work in HR are sort of the corporate heroes right now. And folks who work in inclusion, you know, diversity and inclusion teams, and folks who work on people data analytics, it's never been more important. So we can all be very proud of that. But as far as Cassiopeia, what's next for you on your journey?
Yeah, so definitely interesting times, as you mentioned, and there are so many heroes these days that, you know, I personally really grateful for, you know, what we do, and the ability to influence, you know, other people's life, and to empower leaders. So definitely I'm grateful for that, and really appreciate all these great people that, you know, leading through crises these days. And for us as a team, well, our expertise is to provide insights about the team behavior by using pattern analysis, communication pattern analysis. And this is what we do best. And these days we're just focusing on empowering remote leaders, helping them to just like providing the insights they need the most these days, about the team collaboration, about work overload, about the right balance, as we mentioned. So this is what we do. We feel this is what our customers need these days, and this is what we want to offer them. So we are supporting customers in Europe and Israel and the States right now, and this is where our hearts is, and we really hope to empower more leaders, helping more companies these days.
That's great. Thank you for that. So I have to ask you at the end of this interview, other than probably working nonstop, running and continuing to build a company, what are you doing to keep yourself occupied during these quarantine times?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I hear from different people. They have a different way to address these current challenges and keep their mental health. And for me, I'm a long distance runner, so I really like to run. And lucky for me, I have a lake next to my house, so I'm just running next to the lake. I really love that. It keeps me healthy and in a good mindset. So this is my secret. So.
That's great. And I hear almost all of the pollution's gone. You wake up, there's no money. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah.
Also less traffic, which is also very important.
Yeah, even better. Yeah. Yeah. No traffic. The 101s, although the 101 run into San Francisco. I don't know my roads that well. I know through LA it's a lot quieter from what I understand. So I guess the final thing is, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way? We will certainly, wherever this video plays, we'll be posting your name and a link to LinkedIn, but any best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, any feedback at all, I'd love to just connect on LinkedIn and yeah, find me there.
Great. And I know we've had to collaborate on a few things, and I know you're extraordinarily responsive. So yeah, please reach out to Shiran. And Shiran, thank you for what you do. What your company represents. You're making it's again, like I said, when I first learned about what you do, it really just was it struck a chord in me, and I just immediately wanted to understand more and be a part of it and support you along the way and just be an ear, and I've been able to learn so much from you through the relationship over the past year plus, and so again, thank you for what you do and the service you provide.